Good evening, everybody, and warm welcome to the Rushcliffe Borough Council's Community Scrutiny Group meeting. I would just like to remind everyone that the meeting is being live streamed on YouTube. A recording of this meeting will be available afterwards on the Council's YouTube channel. I'm sure there's going to be lots of people already watching it live streaming. In addition, under the local authorities regulations 2012, other people may film, record, tweet or blog from this meeting. The use of such images or sound recordings is not under the council's control. Just as a reminder for councillors to please switch off your microphones when you're not speaking. Got on the top table myself, Councillor Gareth Williams, Councillor Jen Murray, and then we've got Darryl Birch, Services Manager for Neighbourhoods, Derek Hayden, Lead Specialist for Communities, and Amy Carter, Sports Development Officer. Just go to the first item on tonight's agenda. Apologies for absence, which I don't think there is.
Yeah, there are no apologies.
Everybody's all here and accounted for. Thank you very much. Any declarations of interest from anybody? No. No. Show of hands? No. Right, just for the minutes of the meeting from the 28th of April 2012, is there any questions or comments on those minutes? No. So everybody's all happy for me to sign those. And just have a quick show of hands for those, please. Yep. Right. Okay. Just from those minutes, we've got quite a few actions that I'll pass over to Darryl just to go through them.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So there was 4 actions from the last Community Scrutiny Group. The first one was to explore opportunities promotion to residents of the work of the Nottingham Energy Partnership. That work's now underplaced, and one of our colleagues is been tasked with further promoting the good work that the group do. We were also asked to explore the distribution of leaflets on recycling throughout Rushcliffe, and particularly through estate agents. Again, we've started doing that work, although it's probably relevant to point out that we've also been doing this for a number of years in the sales offices, particularly in new developments as well. So they are sent out as part of a welcome pack when people move into a new property as well. The 2 other actions are similar in the fact that we were asked to explore the possibility of using environmentally friendly materials in building projects, and also consider the building materials used to achieve the best carbon reductions as part of our capital business programme. That work has been done, so we've met with colleagues in our property services. They will continue to do that. It also forms part of our procurement process as well. But I think, as it was pointed out at the last meeting, we also do need to consider value for money when considering building materials as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, just going on to the next item on the agenda, to the access agreement for the Canal and River Trust. I'd like to invite Councillor Tina Cumblack to come and talk to the committee first. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much, Chairman. I'm very pleased to be here this evening. What I wish to say, there is an urgent need for help in retaining the water in the Grantham Canal. The basin at Hickling is dropping around 2 to 3 feet every summer, and Kinalton is running dry. Water's pouring out of broken culverts in Kinalton and is impeded by rampant reed growth. It is the same story in other sections of the watered canal throughout Rushcliffe, In fact, I received information and photographs only this morning regarding similar concerns at Lady Bay. The agreement you are to consider has been in operation since 2003, but is shortly to be renewed. There is a concern that monies are being directed to CRT to improve the feeders at Nipton and Denton ahead of addressing the leaks at Kinalton and elsewhere. There's no point in running the bath taps if you haven't put in the plug. Since 1992, when Rushcliffe Borough Council became involved with the canal, its use and importance to the people of Rushcliffe has continued to evolve. The recent pandemic highlighted how important the Grantham Canal is as a waterway for relaxation and mental well-being. Through surveys conducted by the Grantham Canal Water Restoration Group and medical opinion, waterways are a valuable aid for mental health and general well-being, helping relieve, to some extent, the burden on the National Health Service. Doctors are now blue prescribing, endorsing this view. The canal also contributes through waterfowl and flora to our biodiversity. It is therefore important that in renewing this agreement, Rushcliffe includes maintenance of the water on the Grantham Canal and not just the towpath facility. I'm led to believe that CRT are mandated to maintain 2 feet of water in the canal, which means addressing the leak in culvert and excessive reed growth, which is clogging the canal and has increased exponentially in the last 3 to 4 years. This is a question which needs clarifying. CRT reports on page 22 their success in rebuilding the Lengthman's hut at Hickling. As I launched the campaign for the restoration of this historic landmark in 2007, it has only taken 14 years through interminable CRT administration delays and no doubt a certain lack of funding to complete, despite the local community's willingness to contribute both volunteer time and expertise. The broken culverts and dredging of regrowth cannot wait 14 years. There'll be no water left. Temporary cutting of the reeds only increases their proliferation. There needs to be a proper plan of reed maintenance and dredging, as used to happen under previous management. Promises to effect the culverts repairs at 39 and 42 in Kinalton, as per the report, have repeatedly been promised and should finally have been done this spring, but again have encountered a further administrative hold-up as the Grantham Canal Society, who provide volunteer labour, are ready and waiting. Canal and Rivers Trusts have a slogan which says, "Life is better by water." We therefore need to make sure this promise is fulfilled. I appreciate funding is difficult, hence Rushcliffe need to expand this agreement and aid this urgent water maintenance. The canal is a major Rushcliffe health benefit for its residents. Parkside Angling Club is also mentioned in the CRT document at page 24. We at the Grantham Canal Water Restoration Group are told they are totally frustrated and despite their valiant efforts at volunteer reed clearance are thinking of leaving the canal through the lack of water and dying fish. Please take this cry for help seriously. The Grantham Canal is a very valuable Rushcliffe resource and needs looking after and valuing. Thank you. Would you like me to return?
Thank you very much, Councillor. Just before we go to the presentation that we've got tonight, I just want to remind the group of the motion that was agreed on the 7th of July at the full council, which I'll just read the wording of. It was council resolves to pledge its support to the maintenance and health of the Grantham Canal in the borough of Rushcliffe and is an integral wildlife and wellbeing corridor, and asks Community Scrutiny Group to oversee the following actions: to raise awareness of the importance of the Grantham Canal with the wider community, the County Council and other relevant agencies to ensure water is retained in the water sections of the canal within Rushcliffe to benefit the environment, mental health, wellbeing and sport. to raise awareness amongst the adjoining authorities through which the Grantham Canal passes, to review the service level agreement with the Canal and Rivers Trust to include specific reference to water retention, to write to DEFRA requesting that it's reclassify remainder waterways in order that they may benefit from government funding in light of the health benefits of the canal environment, which have been proven during COVID and consequent lockdown. And I just want to pass that to Derek Hayden, who's going to introduce who we've got for the presentation tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Members will have received a copy of the cover report and the appendix in terms of the work undertaken by the Canal and Rivers Trust. The service level agreement passed to the communities team last year because it's coming to the end of its 21 years, which is due to take place in 2024. Because of conversation with members, it's particularly important that we understand and have the opportunity to consider all the aspects of the renewal of that agreement. So whilst the report focuses on, the first part focuses on the current agreement and what is contained within that access agreement, I think it's only right and appropriate that members have the opportunity to consider the wider aspects of the canal from the water points that Councillor Cumbernack raised, and from a biodiversity net gain and leisure and tourism opportunities. So the recommendations are to receive a presentation from our colleagues at the Canal and Rivers Trust and make comments on the future arrangements for the current agreement, which is due to expire in 2024. I'm going to pass now to Linny, Richard and Richard to give a presentation for the evening and the opportunity to answer questions both of myself as the officer and of the Canal and Rivers Trust. Just one point, if you just want to say next slide, I will drive for you. That's okay. Thank you, Richard.
Good evening. My name is Richard Irwin-Jones. I'm the Strategic Delivery Manager for the Canal and River Trust in the East Midlands. These are my colleagues, Richard Bennett, who is Heritage Environment Manager, and Lily Beaumont, who's Partnership Manager. So we're going to do slots of the presentation this evening. I'd just like to start by thanking Councillor Cumbernack for her words about the Grantham Canal, and it's really encouraging to hear the value and the importance that the Rushcliffe puts on the Grantham Canal, as do we. So what we're going to do, we're mainly focusing on the work that we've been doing in relation to the access agreement, but then we're going to widen it out, talk about the leak issues, and also talk about some of the wider things we're doing, particularly around green social prescribing. So we're going to sort of go through this in sections. So can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So just very quickly, this shows you the sort of the breadth of our region in the East Midlands. So we're going sort of all the way up to the East Coast and Boston, down to Northampton, and as you can see, that shows you the Grantham Canal in the middle. So we've got 475 kilometres of waterway. We've got a number of reservoirs. We've got a couple near the Grantham Canal. Number of bridges, 3,300 licensed boats across the region. But I think only one licensed boat on the Grantham Canal because it's not connected to our main waterway. We can probably move on to the next slide. Actually, I don't want to go into sort of full details of all those. So this shows you this is the extent of the network that's contained within Rushcliffe. So you can see we've got what we class as 4 waterways, because we have the River Trent and the Upper Trent are separated. They count as commercial waterways. The River Soar is a cruising waterway, and the Grantham Canal is a remainder. Now, I think it's quite important that we do identify exactly what we mean by a remainder canal. So I'll read the definition. And this is from the 1968 Transport Act. The Trust's duty for remainder waterways is to ensure they are dealt with in the most economical manner possible, consistent with the requirements of public health and the preservation of amenity and safety. So they're not navigation waterways. So and we can talk about that in a bit more detail as we move on. So if we have the next slide, please. So this is very briefly just sort of talking about us as a national organisation. This is the income. This is our budget in essence for any given year. And this was from 2019, 2020. You'll notice on the right DEFRA grant funding. So similarly, we're in a situation where we're currently renegotiating with DEFRA on the settlement for the Canal River Trust. We were hoping for an indication last month, but quite a lot's been happening. So we're being assured that we'll get an indication in the autumn, and that's going to show what the funding, if any, is likely to be after our agreement runs out. And that shows you some of the other ways that we take in money. So a question we're asked a lot is, particularly from boaters, boaters bring in, I think it's 40 million from our 215 million. We've got, I can show you a similar graphic, which I won't now, of actually the outgoings. Thankfully, at the moment, the outgoings are slightly below what the incomings are. We're spending about 190 million per year, and also with reserves that allow us for any emergencies. And similarly, as with us all, with the current cost of living crisis, it's massively affecting us as an organisation. I think our electricity bill has gone up millions, and this is extra money we're having to find. So we're having some very difficult conversations at the moment, looking at what we're going to have to not stop doing in order to maintain the basic function that we need. Can we have the next slide, please? Thank you. So what we've done is we've kind of summarised what we're seeing as kind of this is our annual investment as an organisation in mainly in the Grantham Canal and in Rushcliffe. We discovered there's a slight anomaly at the top. We talk about 54 kilometres of towpath. The whole of the Grantham Canal is 54 kilometres of towpath. That figure of 34,100, that is just covering that vegetation contract work within Rushcliffe. So that is an error that I need to point out. So and what we're going to do, we're going to sort of talk through each of these in a bit more detail, so you'll know a bit more about them. So we have a vegetation management contract. So it's towpath, hedgerow, and grass cutting. Very specialist contractors that work in those quite unique conditions. As far as operational contractors, some of the work that we do around access, we bring in contractors. Other work, we will work with volunteers, and we will supply materials. This sort of varies every year, but we estimate it's around £20,000 per year. Now, as far as trust time, we've got a number of team members that will be spending some time on Rushcliffe, and that's so we've got operations team, Richard's team, heritage and environment team. So there's asset engineering. So we have regular inspections, partnerships and strategic programs. We'll hear a bit more about those in a bit. A lot of volunteer development coordination, and also you hear about education and learning. What we've done is we've currently got a wellbeing program, which is operating mainly in Nottingham, but with quite a bit of activity happening in Rushcliffe and with people in Rushcliffe. And so we're looking at the sessions. We've been doing sessions at Home Pierpont. We've been doing cycling sessions and walks, and we've estimated that probably about £14,000 worth of wellbeing activities that are taking place within Rushcliffe. We've looked at volunteering as well. So actually, the Grantham Canal, we estimate it's around £25,000 worth of the value of the volunteering. That bigger value includes the River Trent Home Lock, which is obviously within Rushcliffe, but it's not strictly part of the Grantham. So in total, it's around about £130,000 of resource and cash that's going out, being spent regularly on the Grantham Canal. And I've indicated the Rushcliffe contribution is around about 40,000. I know it does change. So I think have I done my bit? I think it's onto you, Richard. Yeah. So Richard's going to talk in a bit more detail about the vegetation and the maintenance.
Thanks very much, Richard. Yes, so if we could, move on to the next slide, please. Yeah. Next slide, please. Yeah. So as you can see, vegetation management is a significant aspect of what the total cost of our management of the canal consists of. I'll pick through a few of those and talk about in a bit more detail, partly because I know from discussions with Paul Phillips, an officer at the council, and others, that people are interested in the way we manage towpaths, reflects people's interest in the way we manage grassland and wildlife habitats in general. I know that's something that Rushcliffe Council themselves, spend time ensuring they manage well, and it's in general among people in the country, really, wildflower verges and such. So the way we manage our towpath vegetation is by having a specification which gives us a 1.5 metre wide path down the centre of the towpath. That's what we consider is suitable for access. 2 people to pass quite comfortably at all times. And then for the Grantham Canal, it allows us to have a verge, what we call a front and rear verge, which is able to have a front and rear verge, which provides biodiversity benefit, and we do a 1 full width cut, as in from the towpath to the water's edge every year. And the purpose of that, and this goes for all canal towpaths, it stops woody vegetation establishing. Woody vegetation, once it grows, takes root, starts damaging the structures which the canal depends on. Important to all of the discussions of canals are artificial structures. Water is not meant to be there, and water is only maintained there if they're maintained in a sufficient condition. So the annual full width cut, along with, as you can see, how many cuts we do during the year, and a couple of photos within Grantham Canal show recently what the towpaths look. If you compare them to other ones around the network, it looks quite good. It's a very picturesque, very pleasant canal to look at. Next slide, please. Another significant aspect of our vegetation management is hedge maintenance. You can imagine we're responsible for a long linear estate within which we try to fit everything in, all of those activities and uses that people have. The hedge essentially needs to be trimmed annually. If you didn't and it got too wide, you'd be encroaching on the towpath width which is needed for access. There can be places where it could be cut less, but you'd have to then go back and cut a bit more in the following year. But essentially trimming it annually is what our contract does. But we've also, in recent years, along the Grantham Canal and also elsewhere around the network, carried out more hedge laying, so it's valuable for biodiversity, but also kind of a great community involvement and volunteering activity. It also enhances the vigour and extends the life of the hedge, so it's good sustainable activity to do. Those pictures you can see are at Cockgrave, where we were working alongside volunteers from the Friends of Cockgrave Country Park. We provided the trainer who did the weekend's training course on hedge laying, and the picture below is not from the Grantham Canal, but it's an example of what can be achieved again through volunteers down at Stoke Brewer and on the Grand Union Canal, who all just by purely their effort after our support and training did 100 metres of that hedge over the winter. So there's great potential in parts of the Grantham Canal that we can have more of that going on, and we're quite optimistic about the relationships we're building at Cockgrave Country Park Gamston is another area where the hedge is in a condition which could be laid. Some hedges need more drastic work before they could be laid. Those training courses cost around about £1,000 for the trainer, and then it's our support in terms of materials for volunteer groups to carry on doing that work after that. Next slide, please. Other sorts of maintenance that we call that aren't strictly related to vegetation. We have, as was mentioned in Richard's slides, a team of asset engineers, including inspectors. So there's monthly inspection of the network. The Grantham Canal is no different to any other waterway in that respect. Noting the condition, noting defects, which can then be reviewed and prioritised and looked at by our asset engineers. Arising from that becomes a rolling programme of repairs. Some examples here in Gamston and Cotgrave area were towpath resurfacing, which was last year, I believe. This certainly doesn't happen every year, but as a one-off last year, 14,000. That's Skinner's Lock near Cotgrave. Also, access improvements. Essentially, from the trust point of view, we won't get people to get the benefits from our waterways, and then become supporters to get involved with them if they can't access our waterways in the first place. So access points are quite key. It's a kind of a before and after picture there of some work that have been done by our teams improving some of those access points. And then, as I'm sure is familiar to council officers, there's the reactive works that come with maintaining areas of open green space, such as windblown trees. We have an estate with trees all the way alongside them, responding to those quickly and making them safe, and dealing, unfortunately, with fly tipping. We go through a lot of rural areas, the type of areas that people are prone to thinking they can, get rid of their waste at a low cost. We have to respond to those, dealing with those. And, access, security, fencing issues as well. So there's a few figures there of non-typical items that have arisen in the last year. There was also mention in the slide on vegetation about reed clearance. Again, not something that we have in a programme year on year. If we go back to our kind of responsibilities on a remainder waterway, but we spent £40,000 on reed clearance the year before last. Not all of it within Rushcliffe, but a great deal of it in areas that would affect Rushcliffe. We've got a linear asset where the water obviously goes through other boroughs and counties as well. If you go on to the next screen, please. Yeah. Leaks and water management. People may have more comments and questions to make about this, but I'd just go back to the point that the canal is an artificial structure. It only retains water by being appropriately maintained. It doesn't want to be there, essentially. And there are stretches that so Kinalton is the picture up at the top, where in recent years water levels have dropped. Councillor Cumberlack's entirely correct about that as a result of leaks. Section at the bottom is in Cropwell Bishop. There's a large section of the Grantham Canal which hasn't had water in it for a good 30 or 40 years, and that's the status quo which the communities in there are used to, but still a valuable and valued linear path going through, with woodland and scrub alongside it. But as artificial structures, leaks do occur. The picture on the right, if you can just make it out, you can see a green dye at the bottom. That's in Muston in Leicestershire. So you're looking at a culvert where a stream passes beneath the canal. There are quite a few of those structures along it. After doing a leak repair last year, the dye test was there to see, is it leaking? You do the repair, you do the dye test, it doesn't run anymore, it's just evidence that. So that was done in the past year, our teams, as many organisations do, will have try to keep a budget for unplanned works, and our teams will try to find money to deal with things which become urgent at particular times. At this point, it was a leak that was found to be repairable within a budget that cost about 8,000 to 10,000 to do, and so that was done by specialist contractors doing injection dredging at the time. But not all leaks are the same. Some leaks can be dealt with quite simply, and over time, our operations team have spent quite a lot of time trying to deal with them in the most efficient way possible, sometimes in very simple low-tech ways in terms of steel piling and clay. We have to deal with it with the budget that we've got available, but some jobs will take a lot more work in terms of both design time from engineers and contractors being brought in to carry out the works. So if I was just to summarise, in case leaks do occur, and sometimes we are happy to live with leaks, being a remainder waterway, we don't have an obligation to retain it in full water at all times, and in some places they are of more concern than others, indeed, to the communities around it. So we do what we can within the budgets we've got available. I think that might be the last slide from me, so I'll come back to that.
Okay. Okay, I'm sure we'll come back to the leaks, but just before we do, we just wanted to highlight the engagement and the wellbeing work that we're also doing in the borough, because really we want, as the council has already said, we want more people to be coming down, enjoying the benefits, being in that beautiful, tranquil place that the canal can offer. So we do quite a lot of work, and as Richard touched on earlier, one of those things is education. We've got a learning and skills coordinator that's been working with several schools across Rushcliffe and building those links with Jessie Gray with Home Pierpont Gamston School, as well as with South Notts Academy. What we try and do is always use the opportunity to raise water safety awareness, and we've just got a campaign going, you might have seen this week, because obviously water is dangerous to children and they're drawn to it. So we do a lot of work making children aware of that, whether it's in full classroom assemblies or getting them down to the water to see what we're talking about. We also do walks and different education activities around the heritage of the canal and about the environment and the ecology. So we're doing lots of that work, and we want to really build on that in Rushcliffe. And I think in this past year we've done sessions with over 400 pupils across the patch. And of course, children are the next generation that we want to be aware of the waters there and the or not there sometimes, and the benefits that they can get from there. Next slide, please. So as we've already touched on, volunteering brings about a value of around £66,000 each year into the borough of Rushcliffe, and that's through individual volunteers that work with us at the Canal and River Trust, often as volunteer lock keepers, but also the partner groups, that we've got quite a few really committed partner groups across the borough, and it is really sad when we know that they're getting frustrated, especially with the water levels. And we are as committed to trying to look at that and find solutions. One of the things I wanted to point out is we have a lot of spend goes on our volunteer lock keepers at Home Lock, which of course isn't to do with the Grantham Canal, but it's right on the edge of the Rushcliffe patch, and where we have lots and lots of young people from Rushcliffe and other surrounding areas enjoying it by jumping in, and it's really dangerous. And we're spending a lot of time not just helping the boats go through the lock in a safe way and maintaining that area, but also trying to educate the young people, and so there's those safety aspects as well that we have to spend a lot of time and energy on. I think the other thing to say about volunteering is we could not do our jobs and look after any of the canals without volunteers. They are absolutely fundamental. We are a charity and we don't have, it looks like a lot of money, it isn't a lot of money for 2,000 miles of waterways. So we're really reliant on volunteers, but equally we know that volunteering with us gives something back to those people as individuals and as communities. So again, it's something that we're bringing to the borough to help with people's well-being. Next slide, please. So as Richard's explained, we've got we're spending about a third of our waterways and well-being time in Rushcliffe over last year and this year. It started off as, well, you can go to the next slide actually, it's prettier. We started off getting funding through the Thriving Communities Fund, and we work with other partners, mainly in Nottingham, at the Nottingham Beeston Canal and in the centre of Nottingham Castle Wharf. But what we found is for lots of young people, especially in Rushcliffe, that wasn't a suitable place, and we worked with groups of young people with hidden disabilities and started working at Home Pierpont, doing paddling sessions on rafted together canoes and things like that. And we've done lots of stand-up paddle boarding as well as the canoeing and other activities. So that, following from the Thriving Communities Fund, we managed to get funding through Green Space, which is Green Social Prescribing pilot project that in its first year concentrated on Nottingham and is spread out into the county, and that's helped us do even more in Rushcliffe. Another place in the county like Mansfield, but we, as Richard said, we're spending a lot of our time at Home Pierpont, at Cotgrave Country Park, and also at Hazelford Lock, which is actually on the Trent, but we've got the lock creates a really lovely island there that needs lots of maintenance, so we're doing a men in sheds with lots of Rushcliffe residents going and starting to enjoy that. And we're working with the GP practices in Gamston, Cotgrave and Crockwell Bishop to get referrals, social prescribing referrals in. That's all amazing stuff that we're doing, and we want to sustain it, but the money's only for this year. So one of the things that I'm doing is working with health partners, the ICP and other interested parties to look at how we sustain that going forward. So that's one ask to this group actually, is we need support to look at how we carry that on. And if you go to the next slide, please. The reason we're so committed to sustaining the programme is that we've been measuring it using before and after studies and questionnaires. So we've got some really good qualitative and quantitative data. And what we're really seeing is by doing the activities, whether it's paddling, whether it's coming and doing photography courses, having mindfulness walks, but as has already been said, coming down and spending time by the canal. And I would say whether that's with water or without water, it's obviously nicer with water, but that really is showing that it improves people's mental health, their physical health, because they're getting out more. It proves their feelings of being connected to nature, which, as we know after the last couple of years, feels really important to people. And it's reducing people's sense of isolation and loneliness. And one of the things we've found with our activities is that connecting with other people is really the most important thing to people. And we make sure we always have coffees and chats before and after each session, whatever we're doing. And so that's where then the volunteering fits in, because we're getting people being referred to us who meet other people, they gain skills, their confidence goes up, and then they feel that they might want to volunteer. And we've had lots of people going on to do volunteering with us or other people, or going on to doing regular paddling activities. And some of them have gone into employment after not being in employment for a long time. So we really are seeing those benefits. And actually in Rushcliffe, we've got some amazing facilities to do that sort of social prescribing, whether it's Rushcliffe whether it's Cockgrave Country Park or Home Pierpont or the canal itself. Next slide, please. So there's a link here to a little short film that we'd really like you to look at later. It is great, and it sort of puts everything that we're doing here into the wider context. But really, I just wanted to end by sort of reminding you all that as a charity, we're very young. We're only 10 years as a charity, and we're still evolving and finding those ways to work with communities and partners, and not just sort of concentrate on the waterways, and especially those navigable ones. So, we're really open and wanting to work with you, and we really appreciate the ongoing support that Rushcliffe's given us, because lots and lots of borough and district councils don't sort of support us in that way, and it is really vital that we find a way that we're all happy and can carry on with the partnership. I think that's me. So, any questions?
Thank you very much for the very informative presentation. Just before I open it up to the floor, I just want to kind of bring two questions to councillors' minds in the room, being that if the council weren't to carry on with the income that the council gives to the Canal and River Trust, what difference we would then see and what that would mean. And also just wanting to ask if there's any other current agreement in place with any other partner agencies about to keep the water in the canal, and also if it's feasible for any work to be done to keep or re-water the dry sections in this agreement that the council currently pays. So the first councillor I've had to indicate to speak is Councillor Malinder.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. There's quite a lot in there, so thank you for your presentation. I represent Lady Bay, where there's a very keen group of people who've been putting in a lot of time, rather more, I think, than was actually put up there, but maybe it's not all been recorded. I think that Remainders Waterways definition that you put up there, I mean, that is horrendously out of date. They were classified as remainders. I think we said at the motion at full council, they were classified as remainders because they were no longer being used for their original purpose, which was moving coal and moving night soil and other things like that back in the day. And there was never any thought to them being a heritage asset or being used for leisure or anything like that. So it's a 1968 Act. I'm a 1968 Act in that respect. I'm 54. I've updated myself quite a lot since then, and I think that Act needs updating. And certainly the classification of the waterway is just wrong. It's wrong. It's not a good one for our residents. And I get quite a lot of stuff from residents, and they're not happy about the state of the canal, particularly along Lady Bay, but also I hear about it from people elsewhere along the canal as well. They feel that the CRT is quite often in denial about the state of leaks, and that the CRT doesn't listen and certainly doesn't act to resolve those. People are quite angry about that, and I'm not exaggerating. They are angry at what they see as a lack of respect for their views, respect for their experience, and respect for the area. There's a lot about vegetation management. I completely understand that. The towpath has to be maintained and kept clear, and is a great way for people to get alongside the canal. But this is the Canals and Rivers Trust, not the towpath trust. And we just feel that we're not getting good value for money with this at the moment. There is a great deal to be said, and we mentioned it in the motion as well, about people getting good mental health. It's good for exercise. Completely agree with all this, but when what they're walking alongside is a set of stinking mud with dead fish, as people have been sending photos to you this morning, and happened last year and the year before and the year before that, then it's just not good enough. And getting the water back in these sections is really important. Where you've got areas that are sort of maintained and in water, that's fine. We accept that there's some areas that are dry at the moment, like Cropwell and around there, that have been dry for years and years and years. And I understand there was always leaks in those areas as well because of the underlying geology. But where we've got areas that are just told are, oh, well, it's just a seasonal lake. There's nothing we can do about it. We're not going to, we can't or don't believe that there are leaks or things that are not addressed. And we're sitting there looking at stinking mud and fish dying day after day. And we just feel that nothing is being properly done about it. I completely agree that we need to sort of look at this agreement and see what's the best way forward. And I'm very pleased to see the bit in the report about this looking to the shared prosperity front to sort of improve tourism and improve the heritage assets and address water loss. But really something needs to be done now, because otherwise we feel like, you know, the various groups in Lady Bay, in Hickling, and other smaller groups along the way where people are trying to do stuff and maybe you don't know about it, are just beating their heads against a brick wall because they're the ones faced with a deteriorating asset from their point of view. There are a lot of culverts under various roads that have been dropped. The culverts are blocked. They're almost impossible for people locally to actually work on their own to unblock them. And that would, you know, be a start to help maintain the flow. And, you know, there has been sort of positive work, such as getting hold of I think it's a truck saw to sort of get rid of some of the reeds. And we're kind of well aware and sort of, you know, commend what the Grantham Canal Trust are doing as well. And we totally understand that they want to get their bit in water, but at the rate they're going, it'll be well over 40 years before they even get near West Bridgford with the work they're doing. It's taking them an awful long time and it takes millions. So we're well aware of the lack of money, and we're well aware that it would probably take millions to bring the whole thing back into water. But we're really not happy with the way things are being done at the moment and the lack of awareness and action to deal with the leaks and maintaining the biodiversity, the water in the canal. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Councillor Mallender. And if I was to say it in the most brief way possible, it frustrates us at the Trust as well not to be able to do more, not to be able to improve the infrastructure and the assets to the extent that they would need in order to maintain the waterways. I think it's not for us to say, but in a sense, the classification of a remainder waterway is something that's beyond our control. But essentially, the scale of investment is required on leak repairs is of a different order to what we're able to do at the moment. So we're able to have done, you know, small scale patch repairs over time, but the larger ones we do try and find money for. We do more than we arguably could, given some of those obligations. You know, we want to make it as good as possible, but all of that is prioritising against those other parts of the network, you know, including those other waterways within Rushcliffe. So we completely understand people's, I'd say, frustration about why things can't change and their wish to see things different in some parts of the canal. Essentially, it comes down to the cost of the type of works required. Specifically, each leak is different. I showed you an example of one that was repaired at a cost of around about 10,000, but other more significant ones require a lot more work. We also have to prioritise our teams and other engineers' time in working up the design solutions for jobs when in comparing it to other waterways and other parts of the network where there may be implications for flooding of adjacent properties, for example, by other leaks and that kind of thing. So I'll stop there. But we do share, and we as individuals love the canal, as people who live alongside it do. We'll tend to hear more from the people that are unsatisfied than those who are happy with the status quo and don't feel like they need to tell anyone about it. I'll stop there.
Can I add something? And the other thing to sort of just remind people, all the vegetation works have to be done because we need the space to be safe. So a huge part of our remit is making sure where the public are going, it's safe to go. If we don't spend all that money on the, trees and the bushes and having safe surfaces to walk on, that has to be our number one priority. So I just wanted to sort of flag that up because I totally hear what you're saying about, it's not just about the towpath, but the towpath is where the human beings are sort of walking and cycling, and so that's a really, that's always has to be our number one priority when we're looking what jobs get done. I think the other thing is, I don't know whether you want to say more, Richard, about the what's held up the culvert repairs.
Sure.
And what we have, because I think what also gets hidden is there's loads and loads of work going on behind the scenes, and it's a bit like the swans you see where there is water. So there's loads and loads of paddling and there's trying to move things forward. So if you sort of explain a bit about that.
So I work quite closely with the Grantham Canal Society, and as you'd appreciate, their focus is up the north end of the Grantham Canal, because that's where they've got their depot, that's where they've got their trip boat, which is where they generate income. So a lot of the work they've been doing recently has been doing a slipway. They're raising a weir, so they've not been able to find resources to actually undertake the repairs on. There's a couple of culverts, 39 and 42, which are particular problem ones as far as leakage. So we've got a it's a simple repair that could be done, a simple temporary repair that could be done, and that's what we expect with Grantham Canal Society. And we have bought materials and they're ready to go, but Grantham Canal Society have got pressing priorities at the other end of the canal, because as I say, that's where they generate their income. I think it is also worth putting in context. At the moment, we've got issues across the network on low water levels. So it's not, we've got an issue of leaks here, but leaks aren't leaking at the moment because we've got limited water resources, and that's an issue we've got across the network, and with these navigation canals that have got water issues. So one of the things we looked at, if we were able to gain extra funding, we could do some more detailed analysis on actually, rather than just what's happened for years and years. We've put in steel piles, put a load more clay down, and kind of patched up the issues, but we haven't really dealt with them. So those aren't long-term solutions. So what we ideally need to do to probably the thing that would make the most difference on water levels in the medium term would be culvert 39, and actually, rather than just patching up with piles and clay, would be actually to do a proper job on that. So we do have some design resource potentially available for that, because we're having to cut a lot of our priority projects in order to save money. So there might be some availability of some of those engineers to look at that in a bit more detail. But what we don't have the resources to bring in the contractors that would be necessary to do that work. So that is significant investment. I think similarly with the re-clearance, we were able to, I think we were coming to the end of a financial year, and we were able to get some extra work from our contractors as far as the re-clearance that happened a couple of years ago. But that is not something we have in budget, because as a remainder canal, we can't set aside that budget and have that prioritised over active network. So it's the constant challenge we have. And I'm not exaggerating when you're talking about operations teams. It's their favourite bit of the network, and they're as frustrated as you are that we just don't have the resources, or are indeed able to take resources from active waterways where we have a commitment to keep those navigable to do work. And as Richard mentioned, really the whole Grantham Canal needs restoring, and that would be millions of pounds. And at the moment there are some potential projects looking at how we can open it up more at the other end. So I know we've been talking with Grantham Canal Society, we've been talking with the county council. There's potential highways money for fixing the underpasses on the bridges on the A52, and I think it's 6011 to actually be able to use that towpath. And part of that will be the county council agreeing a preferred route to link the Grantham back to the River Trent, because that's the key issue on what makes it a remainder canal, the fact that it doesn't connect to anything. So it's not, you can't get a boat on it unless you sort of drive it on with a lorry. So that's some of the challenges, but I think it's quite positive that potential money from highways to be able to get access, particularly under the A52, and if we can agree that preferred route, then that's something, as far as there's a target then for funding, and once that opens up, it opens up the rest of the canal, and bringing in the millions of pounds that would be required to bring the Grantham Canal back to its former glory.
There you go. Councillor Jeffries.
Thank you for your presentation. My husband and I went to live in Cotgrove in 1963, and just a few yards down the road from our house is a bit of the canal. And I used to take our 3 children and a dog and a picnic, and we would spend many happy hours there. But at the other end of the village, almost opposite where the crematorium is being built, of course, there's another bit of the canal. And later on, I used to take my brownies and cubs down there. And the amount of work that they did there and got through their badges was absolutely fascinating. So I'm really on board with this. But I must ask you this. You talked about the work that's been done. Do you use your own craftsmen and workmen, or do you ever work with the drainage boards? Because I have to say that one of the best bits of being a borough councillor, and I've been one for a great many years, I've been on various drainage boards, and I wondered why you're not using our people to help you with all this work.
Thank you, Councillor, and great to hear your good experiences and how much of a supporter you are. Simple answer is we use all means we can. Essentially, some of our direct labour for some tasks, some contractors for others, potentially drainage boards, and the people within them could be people we could consider to carry out particular works. If it's ditch clearance and that kind of thing.
You should, because they're very, very good at what they do.
Yeah, we can. Often our contractors will then subcontract out to a particular person in ditch clearance and re-clearance being one of those examples, and it might well be that they can consider some of those. Yeah.
Councillor Jones. No,
I just want to know, do you feel that you adequately explain to the volunteer groups, which you're obviously aware of, particularly around Lady Bay and Hickling, do you feel you adequately explain to them what you can do and what you can't do and what the consequences are, and whether they in any way can contribute to that effort in either labour but also money?
Well, Lenny and Richard might be able to add. I'm sure he could probably do more to explain our cause. It's And I think in general, we have potentially quite a complicated scenario to set that, you know, we provide already, you know, a really valuable green blue space, but the assets that they're based on need a huge amount of money. That's essentially our message that we're trying to communicate to government. To get the benefits of these waterways that people use takes a large amount of effort and resources. We probably could, even down at the local scale, do more at explaining that to people. We do fundraise to an extent, but that is general fundraising, rarely, but at times it can be on specific projects, which maybe is what the sort of thing you'd be referring to.
I mean, I understand that the government set up the trust to save money, and therefore I realise that you're probably operating under a lesser budget than you might have been. But it does seem as if there needs to be some mechanism for you to identify lead community groups and communicate to them what you can and can't do, whether they can help directly or in funding or in labour. I just think that feels like you need to be clearer with the public in some way. And I don't know how you do that, but there must be some way of doing it.
Can I answer that? I think it's an ongoing issue, because I know I've been with the Canal and River Trust nearly 3 years, and I've seen many times Richard, whether he's on the telly or meeting with local groups in Canolton or Lady Bay, explaining why it is so complicated, the water levels on the Grantham. And I know we have got a paper, because I read it with great interest, about, you know, where the water's coming from. You know, we haven't got a nice natural feed from a river like the Saw coming in and feeding it, and there's a couple of little reservoirs. Richard could say this much better. We have got that information and we have shared it, but I think because people are frustrated, they, you know, it's almost like forget it again. Each year, every year, we get asked the same question, maybe by different people, some of the same people. But you've probably seen on telly or when you're driving, reservoirs are low at the moment. You know, there's our main canal, our navigable canals are low, so we can't magic it up. What we can do is carry on working and finding a solution to at least trying to sort out these culvert repairs that we all agree, if we can try and get an ongoing solution to them. But even when they're done, I think we have to make clear is we can spend a lot of money and we can do them. It isn't going to solve the problem. We're still going to have levels going low in the summertime. And I think it's really important that everybody remembers that, because it's not just those two culverts, it's where the water comes from. It's the fact that we've got triple SI areas upstream, as it were. There's all kinds of where we can't be cutting back the reeds, etc. And I think maybe we could look at going back to your sort of good explanations and maybe turning it into something that's very easily given as a leaflet. What we haven't done that before, because we don't want to be, you know, patronizing or say we're not on, you know, on the same side as the people that really care, because we want to. And actually, it's a remainder canal. We keep saying that because we know as a team we put in loads of extra work, and, you know, we shouldn't be doing that really, but we do it because we get amazing support from Rushcliffe Borough Council. And one of your questions was, what happens if that money doesn't come? You know, it will get cut back to basics of it just has to be safe, you know, literally nothing else. But because we've got this relationship, we're trying to work with people, you know, we are all putting in lots of extra effort. And I think there are solutions to be found, but they cost money and they're not going to be a magic bullet. I think that's what we have to sort of get across. Is that right? Yeah.
I think there's a real crucial point Councillor Jones made around, you know, are we doing enough as a charity about making awareness that we are a charity and actually asking for money. And I think it's, as Lynnie mentioned, we're in our infancy, and I don't think we've been particularly good at making that ask fundraising. We've got a really good opportunity in the fact that, and we're talking about a 10-year anniversary. What we're really stressing is it's 10 years as a charity. And I don't think we've done enough in those 10 years to make people aware that we are a charity. And we've done a lot of research as far as public awareness, and it's relatively low. And if you ask people, who cares for the waterways and do you know they're a charity, it's quite low recognition. And with charity, we need to do more fundraising. I think we've got an opportunity with working with local groups, and particularly when there's specific interest where we can work with those local groups to raise the necessary money that is required to do this work that without that we wouldn't be able to do. And I think the other thing to mention is we've got an ancient infrastructure that has never experienced 40 degrees. Hundreds of years, and it's never experienced 40 degrees. So that's going to have a significant impact on, particularly we've been really struggling with water levels as far as our drought management, because that infrastructure it wasn't built for those sort of extremes of climate. So it's only going to get worse without significant funding.
Councillor Dickman, you wanted to.
What is the primary building material for the canal? I.e. the walls, all the way down. Is it brick? Or is it not dug into the soil, is it?
So typically you've got a clay liner,
Yeah.
and
So
then the canal wall itself might be historically stone, typically, or brick. More recent years,
yeah.
still piling in some areas, or earth. But the actual structure of the canal is a clay puddle.
Yeah, so it's puddled clay in the bottom, I know that, but you got the sides, haven't you? Because at one time it was holding about 5 feet of water or something on that line, wasn't it? So, and you can't just have a like a river or a what do you call it? Just a cutting. It's got to have some sides. I'm presuming it's brickwork, probably stonework as well. I don't know much about canals, but I do know a lot about historic buildings, and I know that if you patch a little bit of something up somewhere, and it's going to leak somewhere else. And as soon as you've done those, it's going to leak someplace else, and it'll be going on and on and on. So really what you have to do, it's got to be drained totally. It's got to be all the soil, all the silt's got to be taken out, really. It has to be, and it has to be fully inspected, and then you can do proper repairs, and then you might be able to keep on top of it.
And that would be a full restoration, and that's millions of pounds.
Well, I know you were just hovering around there. You realise you've been doing it for 10 years, and for 10 years, realise you might have to go for a lot more money. You have to probably raise the game quite a bit more. It's the only way it'll really, really work, or in my experience anyway. I work on historic buildings, medieval buildings, churches, etc., and I understand them to a degree. Just one other question. You know where the dry sections are? You mentioned it yourself, you've got all this heat at the moment and you've got lots of dry ground, you get heave in the ground. Now where the canal is wet, it's puddled at the bottom, it's holding some amount of water, it should be fairly stable. But where it's dried out, the brickwork will be all over the place, it'll be all sorts of cracking, it will need fully inspecting. That's just my thing, that's just my little view, if you like.
And I think that's the point that we've wanted to get across, that those leaks will keep coming whenever we're doing that. But because it's a remainder canal, the Canal and River Trust, we can't do that restoration. And that's why restoration societies spring up all around the country. And as a separate little charity where, some very keen people raise money and, it's happening all over the place. And that's what Grantham Canal Society are. But it's a massively, we're not allowed to spend our money on that. We're not allowed to spend our resources on it. And that's where I think you've got where all the frustration comes from, because we're not allowed to do that. So we do the patching up and that's what we're saying. We know it's not a golden bullet. We will keep getting leaks and we will keep disappointing people, I guess, even though that's not our intention. And I guess that's I know you're planning to write to DEFRA. And that's where, there would have to be a change in legislation for us to look at that differently. But to just put a reality check on that. We're going through our review. We've already a steady state, so we're basically getting less money every year from DEFRA, and we just don't know what the future holds at the end of this review, especially in light of COVID and, you know, everything else that's going on in the world. You know, as staff, we're all, you know, waiting with bated breath and not feeling positive about what will come out of that review. We could get our money slashed, absolutely slashed, and then it will really go back to basics, and you'd start seeing navigable canals start going into decline. You know, and that's where we need support of councils to be saying to government, you've got to look, you know, you've got to keep funding the Canal and River Trust, and you know, and yes, bring your remainder canals into that, but we need that support for our core grant, because we're looking, it feels bleak at the moment from where we're sitting, and that's the reality.
Just before I pass it to Councillor Walker, who's asked to ask a question, just want to remind councillors of one of the recommendations. Is just to make is about any comments that we've got about the future arrangements, because the agreement's due to expire in 2024. So it's just to put that into people's minds, because I'm not quite sure we've done.
Thank you, Chair. And will add mind reading to your skills, because that's just what I was just been focusing on for the last few minutes. Thank you, everybody, for presentation. The geographically, it's not an area that I'm familiar with, so it's helpful to kind of to understand that. And yes, attention is drawn towards the recommendation. Please shout if I'm wrong, but my understanding, what I think I've understood so far is, in terms of the partnership, the council pays the 40-odd grand a year, and in return for that, its residents are guaranteed or provided with access along the towpath. That's the nub of it at the moment. Okay. Now the issue is, as I think I've heard it, is there's not much point walking along the towpath if you've got dead fish to look at, and that's not very pleasant. So that's kind of really the issue, as I understand it. So if, with the subtext being, wouldn't it be great if the council could support, either financially or in other ways, means to make sure that not only is the towpath great for its residents, but the residents have got a nice, pleasant environment to walk along at the same time. So I'm not necessarily clear on what that means or what that support is going to entail. You know, I think we'd all agree that the council hasn't got the funds to make sure that happens, and to make sure that happens. So kind of what are we being asked, or what, you know, is there an ask, or what would a more appropriate, more supportive level be from us?
I think there might be able to go from a council point of view on that.
Yes.
That question.
So, Councillor Walker, you're correct in saying, in terms of the current agreement, looks at the towpaths and the vegetation to ensure that people can access it for walking and cycling, which is a huge asset. We've brought to this group a walking and cycling action plan. The Grantham Canal forms a really important part of that, so it's a really important piece of green and blue infrastructure for the borough. And that's the existing access agreement, which we've had in place for a number of time now. I think what we've touched upon in the presentation, the questions that I think that have become, is the existing towpaths, how that gets managed in the future, but also biodiversity and management for nature moving into the future. What does that look like, and how we manage the asset along? So we've referenced hedge laying and how grassland is managed along, and how can that be improved for flora and fauna. The health and well-being opportunities. So we've talked and touched upon some of those mental health and well-being activities that Councillor Cumberlack has referenced as well, and the important role that they play in from a GP referrals and social prescribing perspective, and the work that we've done with those GP practices in the borough. water leaks, and how we, within the context of what we spoke about, how do we work to mitigate the loss that's happening, and then how do we, as a partnership, work with our partners to try and address that and improve the situation, and well, stop the situation getting from worse, but how do we improve that in the long term? And then really the final point that I've just noted was communications. How do we educate the people that are using that, and the charity, how its operations, and how we improve that asset not into the short term, but in the medium and long term, and addressing the issues that has been raised about climate change as well. So in summary, I think that in reference to the second comment, those are the kind of the general comments that I've taken from this evening. But I suppose that in the next 12 to 18 months is really, what does that look like from a financial funding proposition from the Borough Council, and how do we cost that? And then really the other point, and I hope that colleagues are able to address it, is the UK shared prosperity funds, and ideas around funding that could be made available for that, and have we got projects that are sitting on the shelf that are ready to go, that we could mobilise quite quickly to address some of the points that have been raised this evening, if funding was available. So that's what I got at the moment, if that's helpful.
Can I just thank you for that? Was a really good summary, and I think because we have been working with the communities, we have got projects that can start to address things, bearing in mind that it won't be long, it won't last forever. I think the other thing I just wanted to say is we mustn't forget that the canal is beautiful. It is a beautiful, amazing asset right now, with or without water. And I think for those of you that haven't walked down there, I don't want you to have a picture of that it's a horrible place that people wouldn't want to walk. I'm not making less of the fact we don't want dead fishes, etc. But actually, you go right along this stretch and it's beautiful, and it needs to be protected. And local people would definitely say they do want to be walking along that towpath.
I just wanted to kind of touch on one of the areas that you've talked about, to do with the volunteers and that. And there is many groups that have been highlighted by councillors along the stretch. Are you doing any work to kind of link those together to use resources? Because of course, with a lot of charities around and generating money and doing work and campaigning or anything like that, they've only got limited resources by themselves. But if you kind of got them all, if you had like any projects in the future that kind of manpower and that kind of power from people having more to actually then tackle it on certain sections and areas that needed really mass clearing or any work, is there anything kind of scope to do that?
We have identified that there is a lack of volunteers working directly with us on the Grantham Canal, particularly at this end, Grantham Canal. So it's something that the teams are actively looking at, actually recruiting specific volunteers to be able to work with the operations team, because we've had, as I said, the Grantham Canal Societies concentrating, and rightly for them, most of their efforts at the other end of the canal. And we are looking at a push to actually get more volunteers. It's one of our key strategic objectives in the region. I think it's something we want to springboard from our celebrations as 10 years as a charity to sing about the benefits of what volunteering can do. And I think that there's two benefits. People will see it'll have an immediate effect on their locality, but also have a great benefit for them. So we are definitely looking at increasing the level of volunteering, particularly in the Lady Bay, sort of Gamston area, because if you think of the Grantham Canal, that's where most of the people that live near the canal are in that area. Because once you get out into further along, there's very few people, which is one of the issues that we have, recruiting volunteers, particularly at the other end, because there's not many people living living nearby. So we definitely are. We're using our celebrating 10 years as a charity. It's one of the priorities that our operations teams. We've got volunteer team leaders, and we are hoping to increase the level of volunteering and harness the frustration of local residents and find ways that they can actually actively get involved in making improvements.
Councillor Mallon, don't you? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. There's a lot of positive things been said. That's fine. There's issues around communication, quite possibly. I would submit there'd be quite a few people at the moment. If you went and plonked leaflets through the letterboxes, they would be very unhappy at the spending the money on the leaflets. But that's by the by. I think that what we have, there's the issue you have with the keeping the towpath open. That's absolutely fine. For my part, I'd be quite happy to see us keep funding that. I think what I'd like to see, and I know what residents would like to see at Hickling, at Cropwell, Bishop, Cotgrave, Lady Bay, and by Gamston, is some kind of more of a vision, a positive vision. I mean, and if that means you come to us and say, yeah, we would need X amount of money to do that, and we're going to aim to get this chunk from the Shared Prosperity Fund, and we needed a bit from the Borough Council to do that as well, then you might well get a positive response. Don't know about Councillor Moore. I can't speak for him, but he's the one who's got all the money. But you might get you get a more positive response. But I think that what you have to see is something to demonstrate to the residents and to councillors that you have a positive vision of what it is you want to do, not just keep the paths open, keep the bits that certainly we're aware of in water. Because yes, I agree, it is really lovely. But when I come out of Lady Bay at the moment, and I'll go over the culverted bit where the road is, and I look to the side, I see mud and I see dead fish, and that is a problem, and it has to be addressed. And biodiversity and keeping the hedges laid is lovely, but it is a waterway, and it is a waterway that people are concerned about, and that's what they want to see addressed. So if you've got some work to do to put together a vision to demonstrate what it is you want to do, and if that involves coming back to us for some more money, then please do that.
Councillor Jones.
Yeah, I was going to make much the same point as Councillor Mallon has made. I just go back to this business of communicating with local groups, and you said you might have project leaders in some way. I mean, the parallel is almost with the Wildlife Trust and the friends of all the areas in Rushcliffe that we have. But one of the differences is that there's obviously quite a lot of people who are concerned about the canal, and that there must be businesses and other charities and even councillors with their community grants along the route that can chip in odd bits. So I just think that vision and this is what we can do, this is what we can't do, but this is where you can come in to make that big difference, money wise or personnel wise, is important. I think also we ought to be asking the Cabinet to comment to DEFRA to make sure that the appropriate funding is not reduced to the canals. Those are the two things I wanted to say, Chair.
I just got the last bit to indicate to ask questions, Councillor Pidgery-Horan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I might be going down the path that Councillor Walker was going down, pun intended. I'm trying to understand what the what the issues are. The £40,000 that Rushcliffe Borough Council contribute, has that been in an arrangement since 2003? And it's still 40,000, 20 odd years. Is that right? 20. It is index linked. Yeah, right. Okay, I missed that bit. Sorry. Yes. Yeah. Right. So, because part of the arrangement that we have, the partnership, includes statutory duties that Rushcliffe have, that all councils have, So I just wanted to know, Mr. Chairman, you know, does that, you've obviously been able to monetize the cost of keeping it pleasant. Is that sufficient these days? That part of the partnership?
I think the honest truth is it isn't sufficient, but we also, you know, we haven't come to this meeting saying that we want more money, or, you know, it's been suggested that we start having these conversations because the agreement comes to the end in 24. So we're really happy to have those conversations and look at how agreement would look going forwards. I think the reality is you won't have enough money, we won't have enough money, we've got to work. That's why we have to work together. And like somebody else has said, you know, we've got to get corporates on board, other people on board, to see how you build that picture going forwards. And maybe if things changed and the status changed of the remainder canal, you know, then we could put more effort in. Because one of my worries, because I manage the one person in our whole region that looks after our bigger infrastructure projects, is as soon as we get offered money all the time and we don't have enough staff to get the designs done, to get the engineers done, you know, not in your bit, but in other places, you know, we just, there just isn't enough money in the system, like a lot of organisations, to do everything that we want to do, even when there is funding available out there. So I don't want us to raise people's expectations and, you know, local people start doing crowdfunding and then we go, okay, you've got to wait 6 months till we can get a designer on it, because that's what you've sort of experienced over the last few months, that we thought we'd got a solution, but then because Grantham Canal Society couldn't do it, we're having to go back, look at in-house, or pay a lot more money to contractors, you know. So it's, we have to have the honest conversations. I guess we have to decide what it is that, I think we all agree, we all want the same thing, you know, we want a beautiful waterway that people can use, but we are going to have to look at the priorities and what and how we achieve them going forwards. And, you know, I haven't got the answer, but we certainly, you know, we didn't come sort of going, oh, you're only giving us £40,000. We're very grateful for £40,000. As I said, lots of other boroughs, you know, we have about 3 agreements like this across our region, maybe a few more. And so in that respect, this is quite a mature partnership that's gone on for many years before our time, but it is time to start looking at it for the future. And clearly residents who have got a bit of water want water. I think residents haven't got any, are happy with how it's ended up looking, like in Crotwell Butler. And in the background to that, you've got the Canal Restoration Society that will slowly keep chipping away, hopefully. And, you know, we all do these jobs because we love canals, and, you know, we need all those sort of pincer movements, but we have all got to agree on what we're spending the money on. And at the moment, the money we've got between us and you keeps it safe for people to walk along it. It's very, you know, we couldn't just go, oh, let's stop the leaks, because then we won't be able to cut down the vegetation. So we've got to find some compromises, I guess, somewhere.
So, I think one of the opportunities we've got, which I think, going back to talking about volunteering, and we're really developing the way we do volunteering. When you think of the Canal River Trust, volunteering, it's people putting the wellies on, getting bags and picking litter and things like that. But actually, Lily talks about, you know, we've got resource constraints with the, you know, with our enterprise manager who develops the projects. We've got, I mean, I live in West Bridgeford. I know we've got a wealth of very qualified professionals living in this area, and actually, what we really need to be doing is working out how we can get some like professional volunteering from you know, the wealth and depth of experience and knowledge that we've got in Rushcliffe, and actually looking at how we can channel some of that for you know, big fundraising, raising the profile, because that's something that we've not done as well as an organisation, actually bringing in that type of volunteering, and we're starting to do it better. In Nottingham, we've got the Canal Improvement Partnership, and we're now working with. They're working with the city council. We're working with developers, working with businesses, all around. We all want the same thing, and actually, I think there's an opportunity longer term for something similar for the Grantham Canal to actually start getting people that are passionate about the canal looking at those businesses and looking at how we can all work together to raise that necessary funding to make those improvements that we all want.
We're going on slightly, but from Richard's point and the question about people wanting a vision. So some people might remember we did have, there was the Grantham Canal Partnership a while ago, involving the 3 county councils. The vision for that partnership at the time was working towards full restoration, as in boats could traffic all the way along the canal. And obviously that's still the aim of the Grantham Canal Society and something that we significantly support. However, it is a very expensive vision. A more achievable vision, such as the Grantham Canal Water Recovery Group have put forward, is we just want a bit more water in it to make it a bit nicer and get more out of it that way. And so there is the potential for, to extend that kind of vision to parts of the canal, with a slightly different aim, which it sounds like there may well be wider support for, but as Councillor Jones said, it needs that being put out to people and being able to build groups together and get get the work realistically costed up. The time taken to get those things costed up before you then go and get the money to do it. Sense, and there's a big job to do in the first place there.
Thank you very much for coming along and the presentation and asking all the many questions and listening to the councillors' points of view and that. So it's very much appreciated. Just want to go for councillors to the recommendations that we've got in front of us. I think the first one, to receive a presentation of the work that has been undertaken by the partnership with the Canal and River Trust and scrutinise the work undertaken under the current access agreement. I think we can all agree that we've fulfilled that recommendation. And then with the second one is to make any comment on any future arrangements when the current agreement expires in 2024. And again, I think we've had comments on that, and look into the future and future discussions between the Borough Council and the Canal and River Trust. So if we could just have a...
Sorry, brief chair. So what's the future arrangement comes into the current arrangement expires in 2024. Can you just, the officers, just give us a little bit of about the timeline between now and then and potential future arrangements?
Yeah, really, I wanted to start this process really so that we can now, you want to be having the outline of agreement as far away as possible from any finish date. So obviously, so that we can do our budgetary planning to see if it's in our medium-term financial strategy and what that looks like, and then what the ask is. So I think a clear steer on some of the key points that colleagues have raised this evening. What we need to do is take that away, have discussions with the Canal and Rivers Trust about what that looks like and what that resource entails, and then for that to be considered at a future meeting in terms of a proposal, and then what that looks like with partners and arrangements. So to bring that back to a future meeting and to be recommended to Cabinet for consideration.
A future meeting of this group. Yeah. And when roughly do we know, or is that a bit?
I think it would be in the new year. So looking at probably 6 to 9 months from now. But it obviously has to go through COG and has to go through in terms of that matrix, where it fits in the schedule. But I think the what we would like to be is be in a position that the group could be consulted upon and to make those recommendations to Cabinet for consideration.
Thank you very much. So with just going through those two recommendations, if I could just have a show of hands, just have an agreement that we've covered those two points, please, from councillors. Okay, right, that's great. As again, thank you very much for your time and coming to speak to this scrutiny committee. Thank you for your time. Thank you. Just yeah, would councillors like 5 minute break after that item, because we have been discussing it for an hour and a half from the start of the meeting. Yes, that's okay. Right. Thank you. Right, thank you very much, councillors. Hopefully just refreshed after that 5 minutes. Just moving on to the next item on our agenda, it's about sports development in Rushcliffe in the borough, and I'll pass over to Derek for a presentation.
Thank you, Chair. So this report is to inform councillors on how the council is delivering its sports development function. This is after receiving a scrutiny matrix. What I've tried to do in the body of the presentation and the body of the report is to follow those key lines of inquiry to provide a guide and a narrative for how we deliver the function. The recommendation is to receive the presentation, but then also to make comments on future direction of travel and further activities to be undertaken in terms of how we promote sports and well-being for the residents. So I've prepared a presentation which I'll now not share like that. 1 second. It is. Just bear with me while I try and find the one touch. No, it's just it's on my screen at the bottom. It's just hard. It's on the screen. It's there.
Sure.
Apologies. So the overview of the presentation is just really to give you a background of sports development, what the vision of sports development is and how that's changed over time, and a change in vision in line with key government bodies and Sport England and the Uniting the Movement strategy. Changes in the Active Knots vision, which is the organisation by which we align with in terms of making the move, and then how sports development has evolved over the last 10 years. So just to illustrate that point, I wanted to use this slide to give an overview of the last period and what we do. So the blue boxes to the top just indicate the work that has remained constant over the last 10 years. So we still continue to deliver participation funding across the borough, and that's one of the core functions that Amy does. So that involves coach scholarship funding, elites sports grants, and fans awards. Fans stands for free access to national standard athletes. So essentially, if you are a national standard athlete and you apply, we'll do an assessment of that grant, and you'll be able to use one of the borough's owned and operate leisure centres. So it really to trying to provide an aid to those athletes to participate at the highest level they can possibly achieve. So in terms of club support, we signpost the funding, we provide courses. Amy runs a lot of things around health and safety, first aid courses. We provide facilities here in doing that, and then promotion of major events. We have, for many years, we are blessed in Rushcliffe with fantastic world-class sports infrastructure. We have facilitated and supported many of those institutions in delivering some of their local community aims, from the Cricket World Cup to the mixed triathlon, the World Mixed Triathlon Relays, which took place on the banks of the Trent on Victoria Embankment, the Tour of Britain, which is due to take place in September and took place in 2018, and most recently the Canoe Freestyle World Championships. So focusing on the blue boxes, the Den. So we used to deliver direct delivery. We used to have sports development officers who used to wear shorts and have whistles and were more sports appropriately dressed and went out and did direct delivery. So back in the day, I helped and do a lot of those activities myself, and really rewarding activities such as the Rushcliffe 10K, Summer Hockey League, school sports activity programs. We worked on those. And we also had a standalone sports awards. So we had club development events and coaching, really looking at coaching, work and activity. So moving forward and how that's evolved in line with those Sports England and Active Nuts, it's transitioned to a facilitating role. Just touch upon that. So our role is now more to try and attract inward investment, to try and support existing clubs and emerging clubs and groups to attract funding. We have become more involved in the leisure and play-in pitch strategy to ensure that we are delivering sports in the right areas and ensuring that our play-in pitches, the grounds, the clubs, the areas for sport are able to access external funding and are able to have development plans and 10-year strategies for improvement. One of the key changes in sport and those two overarching strategies that I referred to is the focus now more on physical activity and well-being rather than high achieving sports outcomes. So much less on high performance, much more on movement and tackling health inequalities and the causes that really has on the health sector and how people live well for longer. Place-based approach, so we have a geographical approach to our work and we will be targeting particular areas for intervention. We have merged the sports awards with the wider Celebrating Rushcliffe Awards, so it's a celebration of all that's good in Rushcliffe, and that includes really important elements in sports, and we're celebrating that success, whether it be grassroots sport or high achievement for some of our residents. And then really a focus on is moved towards inactivity and focusing on people that are not involved in sports, physical activity whatsoever. Just to give a bit of an indication of what tracking sport and physical activity looks like. The Sports England Active Life Survey, we have two measures. We one for children and young people, so 16 plus, and then under 16s. The one on your left is adults 16 plus. So we have an active population of 67%. We have fairly active of 11% and active of 22%. We've just done a little bit of a comparator to see how we do with our local colleagues. So Rushcliffe is the best performing local authority within adults across Nottinghamshire. So you've got the Nottinghamshire average and you've got the England average, which pretty much tracks Nottingham's activity. So we're performing well. There's always areas for improvement. It's how we tackle that. How we transition those 11% towards the 67 and how we transition the 22 to the 11. In children and young people, again, we've got 45%, and you can see that's slightly above, but only marginally, the England average, fairly active at 19 and less active at 35%. And that's for a number of reasons. So those are the two key measures when we're tracking physical activity and just where we are. And as you can see, the adult population is more active than the under 16. And that is borne out in some of the strategies around tackling childhood obesity and activity. So one of our key strands is trying to get young children and young people to be more active. How we manage and how we deliver performance, we have the Active Rushcliffe Health Partnership, which aligns health activity and sports activity. So it's I see health and physical activity as one of the two sides of the same coin. So we have specific actions that relate to sport and that measure. So, and we have measures in terms of increasing the number of physical activity adults from 67% to 69 and from 45 to 48. Those are our national targets. But what we want to do is we want to have a stretch target for us to say that how are we getting along that trajectory. One thing that just needs to be raised is we've seen a huge amount of barriers and inactivity around COVID, and how we tackle and address that and recover from COVID over the next periods, and how that will form part of our key actions in the coming years. So one of the key questions was barriers to increase in participation. So they are personal circumstances. So whether it's a person's time to be able to, if they're in a lower socioeconomic group, for example, and you ask them about their physical activity on their priority of 10 things that they need to do, that may figure at number 9 in terms of those 10 priorities, in terms of looking after themselves and having that time to take part in well-being and physical activity, because there are other priorities which are causing those barriers. So some are overarching, and really behaviour change, and as I touched upon, COVID recovery. So it is the personal, is the insufficient time, motivation, lack of support, the environmental, so access to those spaces, convenient sport and locations. When I talked about the leisure strategy and the play and pitch strategy, is having somewhere in your local community that you can go and participate. And we talked about the Grantham Canal quite a lot this evening, and its access to green and blue infrastructure, be able to go and cycle and walk in a safe environment, and swim in some of the ones. But obviously, as we touched upon, the Grantham Canal, that is challenging in some areas. So we talked about tackling tackling underrepresentation. So in line with the sporting and active NOTs, we have a place-based approach. So we're using data to help understand and tackle where support is needed. Using the active live data, we've looked at areas of working, and we have place-based projects in Keyword, Cotgrave and Bingham West, which are aligned with our areas of child and family poverty. So we're using that intelligence-led approach to deliver interventions within those areas that are in most need, to ensure that they've got access to activity. We also tackle underrepresented groups. In particular, we have a focus on women and girls participation, because we see a drop-off in participation and women and girls, particularly girls, in their teenage years and their lack of participation. So Amy, a lot of our work in prioritising her workload and areas of focus will be seeing how we can maintain women to take part in sport as adults, and then really trying to ensure that we have girls participating, particularly through their teenager years, because they face other challenges in terms of participation. And then residents with disabilities and residents on low income, and how we can provide support to those in working. So just a couple of examples of that. And one of the key successes that we've had this week is we work with NOTS FA and around Disability League. So and I reference Gresham Sports Park because we have this week agreed with Nottinghamshire FA for Gresham Sports Park to be the host of the Pan Disability League for next season. So it's now their new home. So you'll remember that Amy and I worked on a funding bid which saw £1.2 million of direct inward investments to development of a Gresham Sports Park, and now we are the Nottinghamshire home for disability football, which will be at Gresham from September. So we worked with Keyword Football Club on inclusive football sessions at Keyword Primary School in some of that place-based approach that we're working. One of the key projects that Amy has been working on, has taken a lot of her time over during COVID, has been the Holiday Activity and Food Programme, which is called HAF, and people may know it as the Marcus Rashford campaign, where they've been providing areas in school holidays where people can undertake a positive activity, a holiday club where they've got to take part in a sport or a creative activity, but also that they get a meal prepared as a part of that. So we've worked with a number of partners to facilitate that across the borough, which included Rattle and Roll as a delivery partner, Excel Sports, which work here, Home Pierpont Country Park, the Freedom Foundation and Lime Tree. We also work with Nottingham Rugby Club on cook and eat sessions. Mixed ability rugby is a part of an SLA we have with them. Just touching again on Gresham Sports Park is a key project that we've been working on as a part of getting this funding. We're working with Notts County Foundation on a Friday evening, which is one of the quieter evenings of the week for us at that facility. So they have over 40 young people attending a Friday night football session, and we have 80 individuals since that started. One of the particular problems we had with Gresham Sports Park is we had a lot of people, not all from the ward, coming into the area and climbing the fences of an evening and using it. So what we've tried to do, instead of getting them over the fences, is getting them through the gate and trying to provide that as intervention. It's really proved to be successful. Notts County Foundation have seen tackled really some significant deprivation issues, and it has to be noted that that doesn't stop our county boundary, because we have a boundary that's very close to the city, so we get a lot of migration. So it's really important for us that we are mindful of that we're getting the people that are using the area to come in through the gate rather than over the fence. So it's been a particular success. And in addition to that, we have a Premier League Kicks Festival, which is taking place at the end of July, which Amy's been working on, which tackles sport for 8 to 15-year-olds. So we had a question about school sports links. So we work quite closely with the School Sports Partnership and a gentleman called Chris Ballard, who works with us, and we've worked with him over a number of years, and having key relationship with clubs. So they organise, so sports delivery is now organised in the schools by the School Sports Partnership. So that individual is embedded in South Notts Academy, based in Radcliffe-on-Trent, and he will provide sports facilitation for the secondary school and primary schools across the borough. He will provide teacher to training. He'll work with those school sports coordinators that are based in the school. He will deliver interventions. They'll use Rushcliffe Country Park for the school sports games. They have a cross-country event which they run there, and Amy helps support and facilitate, and will deliver physical activity initiatives in those schools. Is there anything I want to add in addition to that slide? So, sorry. Yeah, sorry. So, just change the school sport provision. So, just pressures on school to have increased activities specifically in secondary schools, as there are issues around transport and for school to drive in minibuses. So some of the challenges for school sports activity is their access to sport as well. And then we have an evolving school sports program, which is managed by this Youth Sports Trust. So our role has really evolved with schools. Instead of us doing direct delivery in some schools, is really work and facilitate and trying to overcome some of those barriers and challenges. And schools have been proactive in terms of doing their own initiatives, which we've supported and facilitated, such as walking buses and the Daily Mile and active match challenges as well. School engagement generally remains very high and very strong, and working with our school sports partner, we have a good representation from all of those schools. And really excited about some of the work that we're doing, and I'll touch upon about the Tour of Britain, which we're working with those schools to try and get them out and using those major sporting events that come through the borough as a catalyst for participation and inspiration for the school children across the borough. Sorry, I have comprehensive notes. So the county facilitates community sports and physical activity through working with a range of external partners. So we have service level agreements with Nottingham Rugby, and we have over for the last 10 years. It's a relatively small service level agreement, but they deliver a program called Little Ruggers for us. They come to our major events. They facilitate participation in sports, and they help the clubs with coaching and signposting as well. The picture that you have is a piece of work that was really significant in an area in Bingham West on Brendan Grove, which the ward member will be familiar with. We had a Little Ruggers campaign. There was no active junior section at that club, and they managed to get 120 parents and young people taking part in it. The picture to your right is Rushcliffe Country Park and the very successful park run, which we established a number of years. We have with park run is a phenomenon. We have it's a free timed 5K in our parks. We usually have between 400 and 600 people that take part on a Saturday morning. We have a junior park run which takes place on a Sunday morning and really has between about 100 and 150 young people taking part, which is 4 to 14. So just two examples of some of that work that we've gone from direct delivery to facilitating volunteers. So I think Park Run is a national phenomenon, how people have participated in that. I think it's probably appropriate to mention at this point we're working quite closely with Park Run because we're a victim of our own success at Rushcliffe Country Park, and a number of park runs have sprung up off the back of that to try and take some of the pressure. So because Park Run UK are aware of that, and we're working quite closely with Park Run to develop a second park run in Rushcliffe at Cockgrave Country Park, with a hope to have that in place for September of this year. So the coaching scholarships scheme involves delivering sports for sports clubs where we provide funding and opportunity for coaches or prospective coaches to undertake level 1, 2 and 3 coaching qualifications. So we again take applications and we fund those to really try and help sustain some of the clubs and get new talent coming through to take those clubs forward. And we deliver the elite sports grants, which I've touched on previously. So just a couple of key and important points. So we have transitioned really to try and help to support the leisure strategy for physical infrastructure. So we, as you'll be well aware, we're going through we're delivering the leisure strategy and the Bingham Chapel Lane site, which will come online in autumn, will deliver a fantastic facility there. But it has to work in conjunction with the existing infrastructure. So we're working with the retained facilities as a part of the play and pitch strategy at Toothhill School, and an example of that is the work we're doing with Rushcliffe Athletics Club, which is grown exponentially over the last 10 years and have now got track marks. So they're on that site at Toothhill, and they're a fantastic growing club, performing at a really high level across not only Rushcliffe but regionally as well. So it's a club that's grown from strength to strength. The picture to your top left is Costock Road in Eastleigh. So they are developing a pavilion, and we've helped identify that through the play and pitch strategy as a priority project for funding, and work with our partners at Nottinghamshire FA and Sports England to lever in funding to deliver that scheme as well. the picture to the bottom right is Gresham Sports Park, which I touched on, and the picture to the bottom right is Ellerslie Sports Ground, which are looking at addressing an issue regarding ball strike and ball strike nets. We're working with that as a club in the immediate term to identify funding programs to address that as an issue, so that it doesn't become a risk to not being able to participate in sport. So that's just a really whistle-stop tour. There's obviously more information within the body of the report, but I wanted to just give you a flavour of our delivery model, how it's evolved over the last decade, and really the areas that we're working on at the moment. And really what I'd really like is to get a flavour from you in terms of, is there anything that's missing in that delivery programme? Is there anything that you would like to see included, or fundamentally, is there anything that we can add? So I'll pass it over to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Derek, for that presentation. I might have to declare an interest, as anybody eagle-eyed might have spotted actually me on the picture for Bingham Little Ruggers that he's used from 2015, being in the front row from when that started. But yeah, that's grown exponentially at the club to now over 120 kids playing rugby down there. So it's thriving from strength to strength. Just before I open up to the floor, I just got a few questions to ask. Just as the floor is getting very multicultural, I'm just wondering what kind of effort that is going on to try and get participation from many different cultures. That often it's has been like highlighted very recently in the press in some sports, racism being a barrier and trying to get over that, but also in some cultures, people don't always want to go steer children into a certain sport or anything like that, because they want them to go and have somewhere else or a different path. It was just wondering kind of what's being done to engage all cultures of the borough, and also where you touched on the socio-economic issues with getting participation in. I was just wondering if there's anything that's being done into participation into what's deemed kind of costly sports. Like recently on the TV, I don't know if people have seen it, Andrew Flintoff's documentary with cricket, with what happened in Preston, that highlighted and showed the amount of effort that he's done there with the local council. And I was just wondering if there's anything that's being done with kind of sports that are deemed costly to help with their participation within the borough and in those areas, because a lot of it has been with football clubs and stuff, but there wasn't kind of a lot mentioned with Trent Bridge Trough from partnership and playing. You did also say about the coaching funding for level 1 and 2 and 3, which is fantastic to help clubs with that funding, because again, the many training courses that coaches have to go on, it can be very costly for a club. And unless they've got kind of a overarching governing body that helps fund those kind of costs, I was wondering if there's anything being done to try and recruit or help clubs recruit coaches and to retain people that participate in to go into coaching as well, because of course trying to get everybody to do some of these activities is brilliant if you haven't got anybody who actually coach them. So I was just asking.
So, in reference to the BAME community, we work with our NGBs in terms of targeting participation. We have a number of hooks in terms of the standards we would expect to see grant funding and work with them to develop a vision for the future in terms of how that those clubs and sports grow, and within that, to get to that standard, you would expect to see how they increase participation from all walks of life and community, particularly some of the things I mentioned about disability and underrepresented groups. So we work with those groups in terms of activity, and there are certain specific sports where we see, for example, we ran a number of cycling sessions here, and it was really interesting to see that we had a number of underrepresented groups that had participated in them, and it was just that they'd they've not had the opportunity to take part in that. So doing more programs like that and levering funding for sports has been really helpful to identify some of those groups, and it aligns with our equalities and diversity work. What was the second part? Yeah, please.
Just on that, we obviously work with the national governing bodies, and you mentioned Trent Bridge Trust. They've just gone out for a post. It's called an ACE, which is Afro-Caribbean ethnic minorities, I think that they're calling it, and they're going to have a specific development officer looking at those communities, which we'll work with. And we also did a little bit of work in preparation with Nottingham Forest. They put in an active through football funding bid, and unfortunately they were unsuccessful, but that was around working with Asian communities, and we were particularly looking at Gresham and the close proximity to Compton Acres, which has a higher number of that community. So there is stuff going on in the background, and I think it's probably getting more prevalent as we move forward with more people moving into the borough, particularly in places like Eastleigh. But absolutely open to working with different NGBs and on different areas of minority communities.
Just to touch on your point about barriers to participation, yes, some of the sports that people participate in are quite expensive. We have the Elite Sports Grant, which is designed to try and help people to have additional funding to take part. But we also try and work with groups to try and have funding, and work with some of the clubs where they have membership based in terms of trying to allocate some funding for people that they want to participate in that sport, so that there's a route for entry, so socioeconomic needs doesn't become a barrier to participation.
Just on your question around retaining coaches, I think obviously Derek touched on the coach scholarship scheme, and I think I did have a stat which I can look at in a sec of how many coaches we supported over in the 11 years I've been in post, which is when it first came into fruition. We had a very obvious lack of people applying for that over the last couple of years, purely because of COVID and the shutdown of sports clubs. But I think as that's coming back, we've issued some triathlon coaching to support a local junior triathlon club who are looking at. One of the things that I found with COVID, a lot of the clubs sort of coming saying we haven't got the members back, and we really need some support with that. And they've lost coaches because they haven't done it for a couple of years and they don't want to come back. Maybe people that have been doing it for a long time as volunteer coaches, COVID's kind of been a bit of a get out for them to stop. Whereas I'm sure those of us that are in sports club understand once you're in for quite a long time and they try and retain you. So there's a lot of issues around that at the moment, which I'm hoping that coach scholarship will retain. We also work with Active Knots to provide sort of ancillary courses, so first aid, safeguarding courses, which coaches do need to keep their coaching badges, etc. But again, open to ideas for how we can continue to support coaches and clubs. And I think going back to Derek's point around how sports development's evolved over the last 10 years, those were things that we were in the forefront of sports development and real key priorities sort of 5-6 years ago. But with the shift in Sport England and Active Knots strategies, we're looking more at the inactive. So maybe there's some work there that we can do around supporting new coaches. It's in the Freddie Flintoff, for example. Be interesting to see how many of those potentially could become future coaches just through their participation in sports. I think there's a bit of work that needs to be done there. But yeah, it's just prioritising it.
Yeah, and in saying that, we're very aware, obviously the statistics are good. They're taken from 2019 was the last available data. We're very alive, and we have a good relationship with the clubs and society across the borough. We're very conscious of COVID, so the part of the Sport England strategy is that recover and reinvent. So those coaches that have taken that opportunity, that have been doing it for 10 years, and when COVID comes to say, I've done my bit, how do we get those new people through the door? Because in some incidents, we've got people that are struggling to come back, i.e. participants, in some that they've got waiting lists because they've got so many people that want to come back and they need the coaches. So it's about trying to turbocharge, getting coaches through the system, and then trying to remove the barriers for people coming back that may be nervous about participating. Thank you.
Yeah, firstly, thanks for a very excellent and enthusiastic and detailed presentation. So forgive me if I pour some cold water on the earlier bit of the figures, because, I mean, for instance, it said about reducing the level of people on drugs. And I don't know how you even begin to know how many people are on drugs. So I just think there were some things in that earlier bit which I question. As a qualified swimming teacher, I find myself dragged back into teaching for the club for the very reason that you've described, which is the numbers of people have waned in the various coaching and teaching roles. There's two questions really. One I had, you talked about food and activities in the summer holidays as presumably targeted at people who are on low incomes and in a deprived area. But a lot of the holiday clubs cost quite a bit of money. So I just wonder how that runs really. And secondly, I just wonder whether single parents with young children are perhaps one of the most disadvantaged groups, and I guess health visitors and sure starts would be more familiar with those. So I'd just like your comments on those 2 points, please.
I'll pick up on the holiday activities and food fund. So that was aimed at families that are in receipt of free school meals. So any child in the borough that was in receipt of that could access free activity at any of the providers at provision in the borough. I was just looking for some stats because I think it was just under 600 children have received that within. We did summer last year, Christmas, and then Easter, and then obviously the summer holidays this year is due to start not next week, but the week after.
So that's going to be continuing.
It's continuous. So initially it was only for I believe summer and Christmas, and then just before Christmas we were told that it's funded for 3 years. What happens after that, we don't know yet. It's an initiative that Notts County Council are sort of leading on with our support, obviously because we've got the local knowledge and obviously getting the children there. So we've been working with quite a few providers on that. Really successful actually.
Yeah, and you're correct in terms of single parents with children. It is a barrier to participation. We work on projects. It's not a universal approach. We work on projects where we can in terms of with schools and with groups in terms of where they can bring it and ensure start in terms of to try and provide access to participation as well, because it is a challenge in terms of being able to leave your child in a place while you do some exercise. So.
I mean, having been involved in Sure Start and had quite a bit to do with health visitors, very aware that they will know of people who are getting quite low with mental health, and something targeted at people in that situation, I think would be a major benefit.
Just on that, the Little Ruggers is a really good example of that. We worked with the Sure Start Children's Centres back in 2015 in Bingham, and we ran some sessions in Keyworth at that time as well. So that's a really good example of how working in partnership with them. And the Little Ruggers is for an adult has to be there as well. So it is an adult and child activity. So the adults being physically active and spending time with their child. So it's quite a good way for family activity.
And we are running further sessions this year in terms of with our partners at Nottingham Rugby to run further sessions with the support of Sure Starts to get those parent and child sessions.
Councillor Budgie.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Paragraph 4.3 says that there was focused working in 3 areas: Keyworth, Cockgrave and Bingham West. And if I recall, that was a successful partnership with Positive Futures. Is that continuing?
Yes. Yes.
It's Positive Futures.
Sorry.
Positive Futures. So we have the SLA agreement with Trent Bridge Trust, who delivered Positive Futures, and I believe that's still in place.
Yeah, so we still have a service level agreement in with Trent Bridge Community Trust, which covers all areas. It's the geographical targets we are delivering interventions. Cockgrave, Keyworth, Bingham, Mark and his team are working within those areas, amongst other areas as well, and we're aligned with the secondary school as well. I think the reference to Bingham West is trying to get funding because I think the part of the playing pitch strategy, the rugby club was identified as a project that we were looking to lever in funding for. So we've been working with not only with Trent Bridge Community Trust on projects, but also with the RFU to try and identify funding sources to facilitate that.
We just made, Mr. Chairman, I asked because obviously it's come up, and we used to have regular meetings with Mark and his team. And of course, they invited the 2-2 school rep. So that since COVID, that's kind of fallen apart.
Right, yeah.
So it has often been asked by my colleagues at Bingham, and I've not got around to asking the question, is it continuing? So I'm pleased it is. I'm not so bothered about the meetings.
I'll certainly take that away, and in terms of an update, in terms of the activity, because we 2 sessions ago, I think we had Trent Bridge Community Trust did an overview presentation of their activity, but I'd certainly provide an update in terms of their current activity in the areas.
Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Chair. It's very nice to see this coming to the committee tonight, and I think one of the things that I've particularly noticed from tonight is the breadth and depth of activity that's going on, bearing in mind the resource that we have in only 1 officer. So well done. Thank you for that. Because all that is happening essentially by 1 person. No offence, Derek, but I think that's not unfair to say. The other I think astonishing thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but one of our targets is to increase the rate of physically active children from 45% to 48%. 45%. I know it was bad, but I didn't know it was that bad. And given lots of things, well, regardless of the kind of socio-economic and other characteristics of the borough, I would want that to be 95 to 98, but that really demonstrates, I think, the scale of the issue. It's quite sobering, really. But anyway, getting into the technical stuff. So got 3 things, if that's okay, Chair. First is the kind of place-based working stuff. So as I understand it, the job there is analyze the data first, and then kind of figure out where you need to be. And we just talked about the areas. What would be helpful for me to understand, I think, is once you've analysed the data and found the geographic areas, what's the process for then targeting exactly what delivery you put in place to try and address that?
So active live survey data also provides us with that geographical data. That's the data that showed us the highest, I always get this wrong way around, where the inactivity is in the borough, and that was Keyworth, Cotgrave and Bingham. We focused initially as a pilot Keyworth, and this was back in towards the end of 2018, and the approach is a bottom-up approach. So we want to find out what our communities, what it's like to live in the community, what the barriers are, what the participation levels are, really get in there and speak to the communities. And we started to do that. Obviously then COVID hit, but it was an opportunity for us to be reactive. So we did a lot of work around COVID. The approach is to build up the relationships with the people that are working in those communities. They already have relationships with the residents. They probably have the trust with the residents. So to give you an example, in Keyworth, we worked with the Children and Young People Centre, Keyworth Primary School initially, because the data was telling us that there was a specific area in Keyworth that had the inactivity levels, and that's where the children were going to Keyworth Primary School. So we worked with Gemma King, the deputy head there. She's brilliant. She's so open to new ideas and opening it up to the community. We worked with Keyworth Football Club because they had a really keen volunteer in Mark Ritchie, and again he's been brilliant. One of the examples we did with Keyworth United Football Club during COVID was we put together some activity packs for children that the other partners that I've mentioned have been working with. A lot of them were in flats, so metropolitan housing, they have a lot of flats, so no garden for the children to play in. So we put together a pack where they could do activity in the house, and then we used the partners to get those packs out to the right families. And Keyworth United put all those packs together for us. They delivered them, and they were a big part of that project. And it was something so simple but really effective. And some of the feedback we had, which we heard through metropolitan housing, was, initially the children weren't interested, but we left the pack with them, and then they were using it, and the parents were texting in saying how fantastic it was that they had that resource. It was giving them something to do whilst they were stuck at home. So working with those partners is really key, building those relationships, and then the idea, which we're kind of in this stage now, is to start talking to those residents and actually start putting into place, and what we hear from them will then determine what we do. Instead of doing we think we should deliver X in X place, we're listening to people, and there's no point in putting something on if people aren't going to go there, but if they're telling us they want it. And I think that'll be the approach that we will eventually have across the whole borough.
And that's the key change in the delivery model from Sporting and Active Knots. It's not putting in a 6-week intervention of kids love football, we'll put on a football class for 6 weeks, you'll get a lot of people coming, and then that ends, and then you go to the next. It is more of a longitudinal piece of work, understanding the barriers to participation, and it's an open-ended piece of work for that area, and it's based on, because we have limited, as you've quite rightly said, we've a limited amount of resources, and it's about prioritising those areas in most need. So it's a step change in terms of how Active Knots and Sporting. So we've got a lot of data analysis and data intelligence around that work. I'd love to do more areas, I would, but it's a matter of prioritising that. But that is a significant change in terms of, instead of being intervention led, about more of a longer term, and be committed that there's no end to this work that we're doing in that area. It's about understanding how we can make those percentage changes. Just in touch of your point about activity as well, those activity measures have changed. It used to be 5 times 30 of exercise in terms to be active, but the inactivity with Sports England, so they've gone from 5 times 30 activity per week to their key measure of activity to tackle the inactivity is 1 times 30 per month. Is a for fortnight. So as you can see, is so in terms of that, so the focus has shifted from getting those people that are relatively active to those people that are probably the furthest away, that are never going to come to a leisure centre, that they're going to, if you can get them to the local park, go for a walk, that's a success. So that's been the shift in focus, because they're the people that are most affecting the exchequer in terms of their poor health outcomes. So a lot of our work is really challenged now in terms of the most hard to reach, whereas the people that are relatively active, we're providing, by working with our leisure strategy and the play and pitch strategies, providing those spaces and places and clubs and courses for them to actually have a place to go to that's accessible. But really it's about trying to target those people that are furthest from taking part in any activity. Sorry.
They're great. That's great to hear. Thank you. So second point around kind of linked to what, funnily enough, what we heard, earlier. I think we've touched on it. I think I would comment on. I think quite a lot of our partners and clubs are from fairly traditional, sports, and outside of parkrun, what opportunities have we got, or can we make more opportunities to use the green spaces that we've got lots of to get people active?
We've been doing a lot of stuff around community gardens, for example. So part of the Keyworth insight work that we were doing, we'd identified, we used to call it the Keyworth Triangle. There was a small green space which was located within a square of houses, so the houses were backing onto it, so it wasn't seen. You only kind of went there if you knew it was there. It was big for dog walkers, and over the last 18 months we've been working with a company to turn that into a community garden. So Sport England do recognise gardening as activity now, so there's some work still going on there. I believe they've had an open day, or they're about to have an open day relatively soon. And probably just before COVID, the Copgrave Community Garden as well. So there's alternative work sort of going on to provide alternative sort of activities and physical activity. We've also got the walking and cycling action plan. So a lot more walking. We obviously saw during COVID a lot more people were getting out walking, cycling or running, just because it was the only thing we could do to get out of the house. So there was a bit of a spike. So it's about working with the like Rushcliffe Ramblers and the walking groups to try and get walking a bit more sort of happening, a bit more, maybe some more groups and stuff. So there are things sort of happening.
Just to add to that, this is where we have 2 development officer, health development officer, sports development officer, and those roles in terms of the activity, there's such a synergy between. So it was actually referenced in the last presentation about green social prescribing. So our health development officer works in conjunction with Amy to identify those projects in terms of community garden. But there's a community garden in Copgrave, there's one in Ruddington, and a number of spaces. We have volunteer opportunities at Rushcliffe Country Park, and they might not be seen as traditionally sporting activities, but it's more about well-being, access to green and blue infrastructure. So that green social prescribing project is a really important one, which was referenced in the previous presentation, which we've supported and facilitated in a number of areas. But so what those social prescribers do, they're embedded in hospitals. So instead of prescribing the GP, instead of providing a medical intervention like a pill, they'll say that to go out and do some exercise, and they're then referred to a green social prescriber who will look for opportunities, will do an interview with that person to understand their motivations, their barriers in participation, and will come to us and then look for those activities. So by putting on and using our volunteers, using our clubs and that connections, it's trying to challenge those people into sport or physical activity.
And that one's a bit of a personal bugbear, and not admittedly not evidence, but it's just what I kind of think I see and feel. Primary school inter and intra school competition. I think what I see is there's not that much, and what there is quite poor. Do you agree? And what can we do about it?
I think school sports partnership has challenges in terms of its funding model that it's operated, and I think in previous years, in terms of the funding bodies, there was a lot more opportunities to take part in competitive sport between schools, and some of those opportunities have disappeared. And sometimes it comes down to the individual schools and their ability and very time crunched teaching staff to be able to do that. So there are certainly challenges. I think we've got a good relationship and a good functioning school sports partnership, but I'd always like us to be able to see us and do more and push the boundaries, and that's why we try and use our estate as best we can to try and support that.
Yeah, I was just going to add that if you go back sort of 6-7 years where there were big partnerships where you had coaches, there was funding for coaches to go into schools and deliver, that got cut from government. And we say school sports partnership, it's Chris. And he, I think 3 days of the week is the school games role. So putting on those competitions for level 3 competitions, and then it obviously got level 2 and level 1 depending on whether you're in your level 3 session. But since COVID, there's been a bit of a change. So a lot of his work is around the social well-being of students, and working on things like the active maths and building confidence and stuff like that. And I think over time, competition should come back in. I think it's just there's been a shift because of COVID. But he did a really probably about 3 weeks ago. He ran a really big day down at Lady Bay at the rugby and hockey, and it was all to do with the Commonwealth Games. And he had a lot of young leaders who led on that and actually organised it, delivered it. And I don't know how many schools were there, but I've seen pictures and it was quite busy. So there is stuff going on. I think his focus has been shifted slightly, but I think there is more.
Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Jeffries, did you still want to ask your question? Councillor, you got your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Just the focus working 3 areas you mentioned. Keyworth sounds pretty well established, up and running. Where are we up to in Cotgrave? Because I must admit I wasn't aware of the detail on that.
Yeah, I think so. Initially, when we were looking at this piece of insight work, we were quite keen to look at all 3 areas, but we just didn't have the resource, and we felt it best to focus on one area. Bingham has got the arena coming, so we thought there was opportunity to do some stuff naturally there. Cotgrave, obviously you've got the what was Positive Futures Trent Trust delivering some stuff, and there'd been quite a lot of resource in recent years in Cotgrave. There hadn't been anything, no resource in Keyworth at the time, and I think because of COVID, it's kind of put us back maybe 18 months on that. What I would say is I think the work that we've been doing in Keyworth has kind of naturally progressed and is naturally happening across the whole borough. Some of the stuff we're doing in Cotgrave is more around that sort of community garden, worked with what was the Bowls Club. Unfortunately, they folded, but we've managed to turn that into something really positive with the garden. Do a lot of work with the leisure centre, the Cotgrave Colts. I met with them probably about 5 or 6 months ago because they're the link with the playing pitch strategy, and they're looking to get the pavilion. I think they've already started a bit of work, but I was talking to them about what they could do there. But I think probably within the next 12 to 18 months, Keyworth will become it's kind of managing itself almost, because we've already made those relationships. The next stage is to speak with the residents, and then I think we can then focus on that insight work in particular in other areas.
So Cofgrave isn't by any means at the stage of Keyworth?
Not at the moment, no, because we needed a pilot
Won't be for
area.
some time.
12 to 18 months probably, yeah.
And sorry,
I think the key point is we have worked in Keyworth at Cochrane for a long time, and we continue to work there. We primarily use our partners in terms of positive futures, because they have an embedded piece of work over a sustained period of time, and we've got quite developed partnerships in that area. So I just think it's important to note that we continue to.
Sure. No, I'm Derek. I'm aware that Positive Futures were there some years back, and I think it was a request from the town council where we thought, well, we've got a little bit of ASP going on, etc., etc. Can we come back? And they did. So excellent. That's good. Thank you.
Councillor Manager, you got a question.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is really positive, and thank you for the huge amount of work that you're doing. And I'm sure you'll be happy to join in just as soon as your leg is sorted out as well. I think there's some fantastic work going on here. I've seen some of the work going on at the rugby clubs just down the end of Lady Bay. I've seen loads of stuff happening down the Water Sports Centre where we've been heading down there as well. I think it's fantastic. There's loads of stuff in here about sort of Keyworth and Cotgrave, and I was thinking, in Westbridge we've got the facilities, in the larger towns we've got the facilities. What about some of the smaller villages, the outlying places there? Because sometimes one of the barriers is actually getting to places, and if your parents, well, it's not just the kids, but if the kids have difficulty or people have a long way to commute, and then they have to get the car and they have to go somewhere else. How do we reach out to the wider villages a bit further out?
Yeah, it's really a key and important point. So our key focus over the next 4 to 5 months is the leisure strategy. Obviously, the leisure strategy, which focuses on our built estate, and we are doing a midpoint review. So that will we're looking at, because obviously it goes from 2017 to 2027. So we're at the midpoint review. So we're seeing where our priorities now, because obviously we've developed this site and we've developed Chapel Lane. So that's our primary infrastructure in terms of our leisure estate. But what are the other areas? As a part of the subset of that is the play and pitch strategy. So which takes account of all our playing fields and open spaces and sports within that. So it has an assessment. So we review that every 2 years because it prioritizes our funding. It works with those clubs in terms of what is their plans. Some clubs, some parishes, some organisations, it is just to maintain the status quo. That's success. Some is develop that site. Some is to get funding for new, and some is really ambitious key projects. So what we try to do in those areas is to do a needs analysis in terms of what is the key thing to develop that site. And there's a number of really exciting projects as a part of that. It's really important for us to have that refreshed, because it plays a key role in the allocation of SIL funding, in Section 106, in planning applications, so that we're able to say, when we're looking for developer contributions from developments, that this is a key project for us to deliver. And it is hoped across the borough that there's a geographical spread of improvements that's prioritised against, which is done in conjunction with our NGBs and partners, to say for cricket, the development of Costock Road in terms of having a pavilion and changing, that's the key priority for that area. In Clifton, in terms of fair and pastures, as that comes along, the development for that community. One example that we've did in terms of a grant, skateboarding is now a recognised Olympic sport, and we've delivered over I can't remember the exact financial figure, but a huge, in the hundreds of £1,000s worth of investment into the concrete skate infrastructure, which has seen benefits in Lady Bay, in Rushford Country Park, in Eastleigh, in Keyworth, in Radcliffe-on-Trent, which has a huge phenomenal amount of participation, but it's not a physical sport that you would recognise as sport in that traditional competition way. So lots of projects, but hopefully that clarifies in terms of how we get out to those areas. It's driven by that play and pitch strategy and leisure strategy, which is a key focus for us over the next 6 months.
Thank you very much. Is there any other comments or questions? Anything like that? Right, I'll go to the recommendation. Thank you very much for the time and the presentation and coming back with the answers to the kind of very challenging questions that on this item. But thank you very much. Right, it's recommended that Community Scrutiny Group receive an overview presentation of the work that is undertaken in delivering the sport development function and provide their feedback on future activity. That and scrutinise that. To go on to the last item on tonight's agenda is the work programme. So we've all got that. So we've got for October's the customer access strategy and of course the work programme, and then the 19th of January 2023 it's establishment of a youth council, corporate enforcement policy and the work programme, and on the 19th of March 2023 carbon management plan, environment policy and the work programme. Have we got any questions or comments on that at all? Councillor Jones.
Yeah, I'd just like to comment that the establishment of a youth council has obviously been put back, and I very much hope it's not put back even further, because it was supposed to be in October, but it's been put back to January, and I just hope it doesn't get further delayed, because I think it's really important, especially given some of the topics we've been talking about.
No, we'll take that away to the corporate overview group for when we discuss it. And as you can appreciate, that this scrutiny group gets a lot of items that comes through matrix and items from officers to look at. But yeah, every effort will be that it doesn't get pushed back any further.
What guarantee it will be before waste management?
Yes, probably no comments on waste management at the
moment. So if I can just have a short hand for that programme. Right, so that's brilliant. Thank you very much for your time, councillors, and thank you very much for a very good meeting and scrutinising. And thank you very much, officers, for coming along in your time and answering all the questions and presentations and everything for tonight. Very much appreciated, and good evening.
Thank you very much.